Para empezar, les voy a presentar a Tricia. Tricia Bertram Gallant es directora de Integridad Académica de la Universidad de California, San Diego. Es miembro emérito del Consejo del Centro Internacional para la Integridad Académica. Tricia es autora, coautora o editora de numerosos artículos, capítulos de libros y libros sobre integridad académica, y ha asesorado y ha formado a profesores de facultades y universidades de todo el mundo. Sus publicaciones incluyen, entre otras, Cheating Academic Integrity, Lessons from 30 Years of Research, Academic Integrity in the 21st Century, Teaching and Learning Imperative, Academic Integrity as a Teaching and Learning Issue, Theory to Practice. Thank you, Tricia, for accepting our invitation, and I give you the space to tell us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anna. I really appreciate the invitation. It's my second day back from vacation, so I am happy to be here with you. I'd rather be in Chile, I think, but that's okay. I am looking forward to giving you some thoughts of mine on what academic integrity looks like in this new era of generative artificial intelligence, which I will short to Gen AI for the rest of the presentation. And that includes, of course, tools like ChatGPT, Bing, Google Bard, DALL-E, Midjourney, anything where AI generates content. But I'd like to start with a little background, a little bit of context, if you will. Our global education system, whether we're in Chile or Peru or Colombia or United States, we have a contract with society, our higher education institutions do, right? So we tell society that we are going to develop in students knowledge and abilities, and then we are going to certify that knowledge and abilities. We're going to say that these graduates have bachelor's or master's level knowledge in chemistry or biology or English or Spanish or whatever. And so we promise to basically generate the next generation of hopefully ethical citizens and professionals. And society generally depends on our output, if you will, for producing employees, government officials, teachers, leaders, engineers, and, for growing the economy. Universities are very much credited for growing the economy, particularly the knowledge economy, or even changing the agricultural economy to the industrial economy. So with that global education system, we have to fulfill that through this, what I call a moral obligation supply chain. We have to do a whole lot of things that aren't on this slide, but for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to narrow it down to these kind of key deliverables. So in order for the institution to certify knowledge and abilities, instructors have to design fair and honest assessments, right? Then students have to fairly and honestly demonstrate their learning through those assessments, whether those are tests or homeworks or research papers. Then instructors have to fairly and honestly assess the student learning as demonstrated through those products, through those assessments. And only then can the institution say, yes, we can certify this person. We take all of these instructors' evaluations, we add them up, and we say this student is certified. So if anything goes wrong in this supply chain, the certification loses value. Higher education institutions lose trust of society, and the social contract breaks down. I don't know about the trust between universities and society in Chile, Peru, Colombia, etc., Uruguay. But I do know in the States, in fact, I just saw another survey this morning that says we're down to 38% trust. 38% of the public trusts universities. And that's way down from a high of 70, 80%. So we are already losing trust by society. And I don't have the facts or the data to support this, but I wonder if it's because we are not producing graduates who actually have the knowledge and skills we say they do. And part of that could be because they're cheating and we're not really doing enough about that. And what we see then is that students are looking to other platforms. Maybe they're going to Coursera, or they're going to the companies are having themselves to offer training. Because, Google is doing a lot of certificates now. They're having to turn to these other institutions because they're graduating from us without the actual knowledge and skills that they had hoped to gain. So that's been going on for a while, but what makes the 21st century different? What's so different about this contract in 2023? Well, first, we know that students can contract with someone else to write their papers, to complete their assignments, answer their homework and exam questions, and even complete their entire class or degree if the student needs. This is what we call the contract cheating industry. It is global. It is probably worth $1 billion+. And it's so easy to have this done for you, whether in English or Spanish or Russian or, whatever language. There are people out there who will do students' work for them. And then, yes, of course, now we even have Gen AI that can produce papers, complete assignments, answer homework and exam questions much cheaper, quicker, and easier than even these human contract cheating providers. Although we know that even the human contract cheating providers are actually also using Gen AI to be more productive, to produce more assignments, to serve more clients than they could before. The funny thing is that, these Gen AI tools aren't that great, right? I mean, they're in development, but they're currently unreliable and untruthful. So some of what we're seeing now is students submitting work that has false information in it, or they're using referencing materials that they didn't study in class, or they are attributing quotes to an author that author never actually said. At the same time, Gen AI is very good at combining things, at saying, refashioning things. So if I give it some notes and I tell it to make a PowerPoint for me, it can do that. It's not very good, at least in my experience, but it's starting to get better. It can summarize. It can definitely pretend to be human, which is causing some troubles in the sense of students losing, or people that you're using these tools, losing a sense of reality, of thinking that they're talking to an actual human being when they're not. And they're very good at connecting systems. Every day on Twitter, I see a new release about an app that's now connected to ChatGPT to do things that it couldn't do before. And it's getting more and more sophisticated. It means that we make it so easy for students to not do the work that's assigned to them. So look how fast, and I'm sure you've already played with it, but look how fast, this is ChatGPT 4. Look how fast it's answering an assignment prompt for me. Now, this prompt should have been hard for ChatGPT to answer, because it's asking, what do you think? What did you learn? It's more supposed to be personal, which we thought back in November 2022, when it was released, that was a way to make it so that the student wouldn't be able to use it to do their assignment. But we can see that it's very good at doing this. It says, oh, this idea of abundance particularly struck me as a key component. So all you have to do, really, you'll notice at the beginning of the prompt, I said, pretend you are a university student. If I just gave the prompts to the machine, it would say, I'm a generative AI, I can't think, I don't have opinions. But as soon as I tell it, well, pretend that you are a student, If I wanted to get really specific, I could say, write this as a sophomore taking an English class for the first time, and write this essay. Then it would do that. And so we know that even since November, Gen AI has really evolved. And it's really, although it was trained just to be a sentence completion machine, this is why it's not truthful, right? Because it wasn't trained to be truthful. It was just trained to find the next best word in the sentence. But its goal is to satisfy you, is to answer your question. And so it will do what it needs to do to answer that question. And so Gen AI has opened up the world of outsourcing to all students. Generally speaking, it's free. ChatGPT 4 costs, but a 3.5 does not, Bing does not, Google Bard does not. And now it's being integrated into everything. So right in Google Docs, it says, help me write. There's a button, and students just have to push it and it will start writing their papers for them. So that idea of looking at a blank screen and trying to figure out how to start is gone. That creative struggle at the beginning, that struggle of thinking at the beginning is disappearing for students because that button is right there. It's very hard for them to resist that temptation. So what does that mean for us? What does it mean that students can outsource their learning and assignments both to other people and machines? Well, certainly it's a threat to the integrity of our degrees, because without significant changes to what we do, we won't know whose knowledge and abilities we're certifying, right? We need to change. That's the key. Unfortunately, we need to change. We cannot keep teaching as if it's the 20th century and the contract cheating industry and Gen AI didn't exist. Now, having said that, cognitive offloading isn't new. We've always cognitively offloaded. When before you go to the grocery store, you write a list of what you need so you don't have to remember it, right? That's cognitive offloading. And so we have to decide in school, when is it cognitive offloading and okay, and when is it cheating? Is it okay to use Google Translate? Maybe in some disciplines, but maybe not in language class where you're trying to actually teach people another language. Getting notes from friends, maybe that's okay. You didn't go to class, you got their notes, but maybe it's not okay to get the exam questions from them because they took the exam first. Using a calculator, sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not, depending on the goal of the course and the expectation. Using spelling and grammar checks is common now. We don't assess spelling and grammar anymore because we know the machines are doing it for the students. Remember when we were all upset about students using what we call, I think you have them in Spanish, Cliff or Sparks notes, right? Where you don't have to read the book anymore because somebody summarized them for you, right? And you had to buy these Cliff or Sparks notes. Well, now Gen AI will summarize the reading for you. And so while it seems clear that it would be wrong for students to outsource their academic work to people, whether it's family, friends, or contract cheating providers, it feels a bit different when it comes to Gen AI. It's not so clear, I think, to the students or the professors or the universities about is this cheating or is this a new kind of way of doing things, of cognitively offloading certain tasks to free us up to do higher order tasks. And so this question will become more and more difficult to answer. Is it cognitive offloading or is it cheating? This will become more difficult to answer as Gen AI is further integrated into all the tools we use regularly, whether for student academic work or for our work as professors or lawyers, accountants, and so on. And so not only will it be difficult to stop students from using it, right, which is our first instinct, is to prohibit it, we're faced with a really key question. What does this mean for education? What does it mean for teaching, for learning, for instructional design, for assessment? How should we teach differently than we did before Gen AI? In my 2008 book, Academic Integrity in the 21st Century, a Teaching and Learning Imperative, with which Anna mentioned, 2008, that was a long time ago, I encouraged the higher education community to stop asking, how do we stop students from cheating? And start asking, how do we ensure students are learning? This advice to focus on learning, as well as that quality assurance process, has stood the test of time, I would argue, and has been become even more relevant now. How do we ensure, in other words, how do we assess students are learning in this era when we don't know who produced the product that we are using for that assessment? So this is scary, right? We just got out of the pandemic. We just got out of having to figure out how to teach remotely. And I think most of us would agree that we didn't do it well, but we did the best we could with the time we had. And we started getting back to normal, and then this came along. And so it's quite overwhelming for both instructional designers, for instructors, for the university, and frankly, for students. So I wanted to give you some first steps that I think are easier, and then I'll talk about some second and third steps, and they get progressively, I think, more difficult. So first steps, breathe. This is a time of great change, and it's a struggle. For many of us, we don't have time or necessarily the knowledge to redesign our classes, to rethink all of our assessments. And that's overwhelming. And so let's breathe, because really the academic integrity strategies that we talk, David and I, and our co-authors talk about in our edited book that Anna mentioned, the lessons learned from 30 years of research, academic integrity strategies haven't changed, right? The tool with which students are cheating has changed, but the reasons why students cheat has not changed for hundreds of years. And so let's take a breath and realize that we can continue with our same academic integrity strategies that we've always recommended. Then we really do need to update our syllabus if we haven't already. We need to clarify academic integrity, artificial intelligence, and whether it's permitted to be used or not, and how it's permitted to be used. You can use it in this way, but not this way. When you do use it, you need to acknowledge it. And then we need to communicate with, not at our students, but with our students about academic integrity and learning. And I've got I think this is so key that I'm going to share with you just 2 ideas for doing that pretty easily. And it's really important that we communicate with our students, not at our students, right? They're as confused about this as you are, and they need our guidance, but we need to also co-create this with them because they have ideas as well. And I'll show you some stats that back that up. Then we need to understand. You need to, if you haven't already, play with Gen AI for your classes that you teach. Test your assignments and prompts in there. Are they really easy to answer? My guess is a lot of our prompts are, and I know our faculty here have been extremely surprised by some of their prompts and how easy it is for Gen AI to answer. And then you want to attend to assessment integrity as always. We have to keep a lookout for signs that learning isn't happening. And notice the phrasing there. I'm not saying looking for signs of cheating. You're not cops, you're educators. Looking for signs that learning isn't happening. That's our responsibility and that's our goal. Okay, so as I promised, I want to stick with communication for a bit because I think this is really, truly so important right now since we're in the beginning of understanding what Gen AI is. So why should we talk with our students about this? Now, these stats are from America, but I hope that there's a survey like this in your country. And if there's not, maybe you could be the one to do it. But we need to talk to our students about this because they're worried. So this survey is, I think, of 1,000 and some students in America. So 27% are worried about the impact of artificial intelligence on their education. They're worried they're not going to have a job when they're done. They're worried about other students cheating and diminishing the value of their degree. So 31% are worried about the impact on their career. I've had students say to me, I guess I shouldn't become a computer programmer because the computer can do that for you. Or why should I learn another language? I was going to become a translator, but it sounds like, we're going to have that universal translator from Star Trek soon. So what's the point? 40% are worried about artificial intelligence defeating the purpose of education. They think AI is going to do all the jobs and do all the thinking. They don't understand how much, even more important, human critical thought is given the advances in Gen AI. They're worried about that. And 48% are worried about the impact of artificial intelligence on society, about these socialization things, about people staying in their houses even more, or back to like they were in the pandemic and only interacting with machines or robots and not other humans. And they're worried about that. They're also worried about the dis and misinformation that Gen AI can produce to influence our democracies. And that's a huge worry for all of us. We also need to talk to them because many of them are already using it. This is from the same survey. 41% are using AI tools to complete assessments. 41% think that using AI tools to complete assessments is morally wrong. Yet, 48% think it's possible to use them in an ethical way to complete assignments. So we got, almost a 50-50 split here as no, it's morally wrong, no, it's okay in certain ways, right? And of those students, of that 48% who have used AI tools, 50% say they use it for assistance, right? An idea, getting started on an assignment. 30% say they used it for the majority of their assignment, and 17% said they used it to do the entirety of the assignment. 17%. That's what I would say is cheating, right? They've cognitively offloaded the entire assignment to Gen AI, handed it in as if it was their own work. That means 17% of these 1,000 students are already cheating with it. And I would say even 30% probably are cheating as well, depending on what they mean by the majority. And the reason why that 17% are using it, 51% of them think the results can pass as human, i.e. they think they can get away with it. One of the things that stops students from cheating is the likelihood of being detected, right? So we have to talk about it, right? Because they're thinking about it, they're using it, we can't avoid it. And we also have to talk about it because it is and will increasingly be a big part of our lives, right? Students are going to be using it in their workplace. They're going to be using it in their personal life. So it is time for the talk. And so as promised, I'm going to give you 2 simple ideas for this talk, because this can be overwhelming or difficult. People will say, well, I'm not, and I don't teach ethics. I don't know how to talk to students about this. So I want to give you 2 simple ideas, no matter what your discipline is. So the first one is co-create a statement of values. So the International Center for Academic Integrity, ICAI, as we call it in Spanish, has 6 fundamental values, and they're listed there in the left-hand side: courage, fairness, honesty, respect, responsibility, and trustworthiness. And I've done this with my students, and it's really quite powerful. So you could have a conversation with your students about what behaviors of yours would uphold these values, but also what behaviors of me, and if you have TAs or instructional assistants, what behaviors of the instructional team would uphold these values. This is communicating with the students, right? They are going to come up with the same things that you would come up for your rules anyways. They're going to say coming to class prepared for themselves. They're going to say not plagiarizing. They're going to say doing your own work, so on and so forth. And for you, this shows them, by listing your behaviors as well, shows them that we're in this together. That it's not just the student's responsibility to create an ethical classroom, but it's our responsibility. So for things for you, they're going to say things like, you're going to give us feedback on time so we know how we're doing before the next assessment is due. You're going to show up on time and prepared for class. So this can be a really powerful conversation. And as you can see, it's quite simple. You could start it online first, outside of class. You could have students think about it individually or in small groups, and then you could have a conversation in class and finish off the document and share it publicly with the class. The other idea is you could co-write a syllabus statement about artificial intelligence with your students. One idea is the students could prompt GPT themselves. They could use the prompt, how does artificial intelligence impact academic integrity and then this depends on your class, and learning organic chemistry, and learning economics, cost-benefit analysis, whatever. But they could prompt GPT to see that GPT itself will say, hey, I could do this stuff for you, so that impacts academic integrity. They could continue to think about what should we have as our rule for using, given these powers that GPT has, what could we have as our rule for the class? Students could finalize a statement based on their own thoughts about what ChatGPT says and just their own thoughts about it. And then the class could discuss the variety of statements that they've come up with and decide on a final one. Depending on the size of your class, you might do this in small groups. You might do some of it asynchronously. You might do some of it in class. I do recommend, and I know everybody says I don't have enough time for all the content in my class to do these things in class, but I encourage you to think 20 minutes. Can I carve out 20 minutes to talk about academic integrity and artificial intelligence with my students, not at my students? I just think it's that important that we do that. It will save you time on the long run when students aren't as confused. Now, what I'm saying here is not going to stop the students who would cheat no matter what. I'm talking about the majority of students who cheat because they don't think about it. They don't realize they're cheating. They just don't give it enough thought. Okay, so those are two ideas for communicating integrity, which was part of my suggestions of your first steps, right? So breathe, rewrite your syllabus, communicate with your students about Gen AI and academic integrity, play around with your assignments in generative AI, and then start to think about how might I have to do things differently and attend to assessment integrity. So those are the first steps. Once you've got a handle on those first steps, second steps. Can you tweak any of your assignments to make it two things? The students less motivated or more motivated to do the assignments themselves, and also just harder to use Gen AI to do the assignments. So contextualize it to class. ChatGPT and Bing and Google Bard don't read. They don't read everything that you've done in class. They're not there for the discussions. Now, can students upload readings to certain Gen AI? Can they upload your podcast or a recording of the lecture? Yes, but again, you're creating obstacles where only the most serious cheaters are going to bother doing all of that, right? So contextualize it to class. Move your assignments up taxonomies of learning. So anything at the bottom of, say, Bloom's taxonomy, recall, for example, is really easy for Gen AI to do. So move them up. So it's more of application, synthesis, analysis, creation. You want to move things up that ladder. Add what we call metacognitive or process reflection. So this is asking students to reflect on their completion of the work, reflect on how they used Gen AI to complete their work. These are really good doing orally if you can, or even at the beginning of class, building in some time at the beginning of class, say 5 minutes, where students will write and think, pair, share about their process for understanding the material this week, or how did you do on that last midterm? They can reflect back on how they did and what they might change for the future. Rethink pertinent outputs. So one thing I think we're going to have to do, and this is going to be really difficult, is how can we assess process over product? Right now, we really depend on product, essays, tests, research papers, lab reports. We assume that students have done those and that they're good proxies of their knowledge and abilities. I think we have to assume that less and less. I think we have to figure out, how do we see a student doing the lab, not just look at their lab report as evidence that they did the lab. Think about it as on a job. A lot of times our people around us are seeing how we do our job. They're seeing our process. And then consider the value of in-class assessments, right? My colleague Philip Dawson in Australia talks about academic integrity versus assessment security. Academic integrity is a lot of stuff that I already talked about. But at some point, we have to focus on assessment security. Can we say for certain that this student is the one who has this knowledge and abilities? That means that some of our assessments, at least the summative ones, have to be proctored. They have to be in person, or they have to be oral, one-on-one or group. And then focus on mastery over performance, which I'm going to say more about, and give perceived good instruction, which I'm also going to say more about. So mastery performance. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do to create a mastery-oriented environment. I can't get into all of them today, but I would say a couple of lower level ones. Scaffolding assessment. So I was speaking with a professor who was teaching this summer and was trying to think about how to deal with Gen AI. He had 3 papers that formed the assessments for the class, and definitely ChatGPT could do all 3 of the papers as the prompts were written. He then told me about this project that he used to have students do that he loved and the students loved, but he ended it because it was too much work, I think. I'm trying to remember it, but it was too much work. On top of these other 3 papers, he had a project. So I said, well, what are the learning objectives for the class? What do you really want students to learn by the end of the course? Does that final project meet those learning objectives or demonstrate those learning objectives? He said, yes. So I said, drop the other papers and just make all of the assessments as a scaffolded ladder up until that final project. And so scaffolding, again, doesn't stop students from cheating, doesn't stop students from farming it out to ChatGPT, but it gives them more intrinsic motivation to not, because they are working towards something, especially if that project, that something is publicly accountable. They have to present it. They have to show it to people beyond you. And then they're building along the way. It also increases their self-efficacy that they can do it. So students might cheat because they have low belief that they can do it, that they can do the work or do the work to the level or the grade they want. And so scaffolding assessments allows a student it breaks it down into smaller chunks, manageable chunks, and then the student believes that they can do it, and so they'll be less likely to cheat. So that's a really good example of something that you could take an existing assessment and just maybe reduce the number of different types of assessments you have, and instead create more of a ladder, a scaffolded approach. It also addresses that aligned learning objectives, making sure your learning objectives are actually aligned with the activities and the assessments you're having students do, right? I think too often we have our learning objectives at the beginning of the syllabus, and then we kind of forget about them. Are your activities and your assessments actually aligned with the learning objectives for the class? And then if you could do one other thing, try and make the assessments more meaningful to the students. So instead of having students, look at case studies, if you're in a business, you teach business and you're having students look at case studies of businesses out there who have made a bad decision, and you analyze it from that from the course material. What about taking students' own bad decision that they've had in their life and letting them analyze it from that perspective? And what if you were an organization, or what if you were a CEO of an organization? What does that bad decision look like there? And how would that impact be? So making things more meaningful to students, more relevant to their lives, can also be a way to increase their intrinsic motivation and reduce their temptation to cheat. I would also get you to think about, in your courses, what are you having students do that's not being assessed? Tasks that are not leading to the mastery of the learning objectives. So for example, we might have students be doing lab reports for a science class and writing an introduction for that, doing a traditional lab report. And if the learning objective is to understand certain concept in chemistry, is doing a lab report in a traditional journal article format really tied to that learning objective? Is it really something that's meaningful to the student that they're going to do in the future? Most students are not going to have to write lab reports in the future. They may have to be able to read them and understand them, right? And critically think about them, but they're not going to have to write them. So is there a different way in which we can assess that? I'd also encourage you to think about points you're giving that are not tied to the learning objectives. So attendance points for showing up in class. Is that leading to mastery, or is that just leading to bodies in seats and not necessarily the meeting of learning objectives? So thinking about anything like that, and any task that could be cognitively offloaded to Gen AI. Could they use Gen AI to do their research more than they're using it now, for example? Okay, so that's creating a mastery-oriented environment. And the second thing I wanted to talk about was give perceived good instruction. So one thing we know about students is they're more likely to cheat if they think they're in a bad instructional environment. And this is one of the reasons we saw more cheating during the pandemic. Not only were there more temptations and opportunities for cheating, but a lot of us weren't teaching as good as we normally do because it was sudden and we had to figure out what we were doing. And so what is perceived good instruction? Students think that it's a good instructor when they're engaged. It doesn't, as I say, it doesn't mean you have to be a charismatic entertainer, but you have to care about the material. You have to care about the students. You have to be clearly engaged in being there. And not all the time. Sometimes we have bad days, but for the majority, the students see you as present and engaged. Being consistently reliable, right? Not constantly saying, I'll get you your feedback by this date, and being, oh, I'm late again, it'll be next week. Being where you promise that you're going to be. Attending to at-risk signals. And I don't mean necessarily just at risk for cheating, but at risk for failing. Who's not showing up? Who's not engaging? Can you reach out to them? Can you just check in with them and let them know that they've been noticed? If you teach large classes, this is particularly important, but even if you teach smaller classes. And really being clear and specific, and this includes not only about your academic integrity rules, but just in general about your expectations. Again, this doesn't stop students from cheating, but it increases their desire, their intrinsic motivation to learn and to be in relationship with you. So that means not basically cheating on you, right? So that's the point of that. And really what it says is a student will use bad instruction, and again, it could be just perceived bad instruction, to justify, to rationalize their cheating behaviors because they think there's no other way to succeed in the course other than to cheat because they feel like they're not getting their feedback or the instructor doesn't care. So this is about, again, reducing their motivation. Okay, so the second steps were to tweak your assessments and start looking at, if you haven't already, creating a mastery-oriented environment and looking at the ways in which you can improve your instruction. Third steps, these are even harder. Redesigning your entire class. Backwards learning design, starting with your learning objectives, and then reimagining your assessments, both formative and summative, to meet those learning objectives. Really rethinking pedagogy. Can you flip your classroom? Can you create a more active learning, engaged classroom? This is what students need us for, right? For a long time, for most of the 21st century, students haven't needed us for our knowledge or our books. They have the internet for that. They need us for social interaction. They need us for engagement. They need us for this active learning. If we're going to survive, and by we, I mean the higher education system, if we're going to survive in this new future, we are going to have to be less passive, less lecture-based, more interactive, more engaged. And you may also want to reconsider your grading techniques. Do you want to move to mastery grading or specifications grading or even ungrading? Those are some things that you can think about. You could also think about teaching with artificial intelligence. Could you incorporate the use of Gen AI into your teaching? Having students use ChatGPT or whatever, DALL-E or Midjourney if you're a visual arts person, and have them read the output and critique it and make it better, kind of like reverse engineering a paper. Are there skills that you can teach the student and then allow them to cognitively offload? So we still teach students basic arithmetic, right? Even though their calculators exist, but then we allow them to use calculators so they can do higher order math skills. Does that relate to your discipline? Is there something in your discipline that works the same way? Ask the students to design test questions with AI. You could create a whole test question bank with your students and with Gen AI. And then finally, use artificial intelligence to help you. You can ask it to help you revise your lectures, update your syllabus, create lesson plans, give students feedback, definitely rewrite, write, and assessment questions, and even do some grading. So these are your third steps that if you're ready, you can move towards these areas. And just remember, really learning with integrity is still the ultimate goal, whether we have Gen AI or not. We have not had a sufficient focus and by we, I mean writ large, individuals might have, but we have not had sufficient focus on learning with integrity. We have been too focused on credit hours, exam scores, bums in seats in terms of attendance, and not necessarily learning with integrity. This is the ultimate goal that we want to keep in mind. And it's also a good goal to keep in mind because it's positive and affirmational and helps us continue to move forward despite the obstacles that seem to continually jump in our way. And thank you. And that's now time for questions.
Thank you, Tricia, for your interesting presentation. Now we have a space for a few minutes of Q&A session. We have the following question for the audience. First, what do you think should be the first step a teacher should take to adopt his or her evaluation to this context?
And by evaluations, do they mean like the assignments, not their evaluations of them as teachers, but your evaluations of students, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think test them in the Gen AI tool if you haven't already. Take your prompts, put it in there, and see how easy it is for Gen AI to answer. That's the very first thing I think you need to do because it is very eye-opening and illuminating. It's scary because then you realize you have some work to do. So I would say that's the very first step, and then look back to your learning objectives. Okay, what are my learning objectives? Is there a different way that I can tweak this evaluation slightly, or do I have to drop this evaluation and rethink what I can use to measure the student's achievement of that learning objective?
Thank you, Tricia. Then, do you think it will be possible to really evaluate the originality of the writing in this context?
Okay. Optimistic Tricia says, yes, but we're going to have to think about it in different ways. So pessimistic Tricia says, no, we're doomed. And I do think that the way in which we've done it traditionally is defunct. Go away, write me a 10-page research paper, come back, give me the research paper. You will not be able to evaluate the originality of that writing anymore. We cannot use those AI detectors. They do not work. I don't think they will ever work because part of the problem is that the artificial intelligence has been trained, but the people that have developed it have no idea how it's evolving. So it's hard to create a detector to counter that, right? I hope we have a detector, but I don't think we will. So, but optimistic, Tricia says, yes, but we're going to have to do writing in process. We're going to have students do more writing right in class. Again, this is related to the active flipped classroom, right? They won't come to class to be lectured at. We'll do lectures pre-recorded. They'll view them outside of class. Then they'll come to class and they will engage in the process of writing together. They will have to explain their writing to other people, to their peers, to the instructors. And that's how we're going to be able to evaluate the originality of writing. To me, the bigger question is, will we teach writing anymore? And if we are going to be teaching writing, will we still be teaching writing in the same way? Like I said, now with this Write For Me button in Google Docs, do we stop teaching the generation of ideas? How do you start at the blank page? We start with that output, and really what we're teaching is critical thinking, evaluating the output, rewriting, revising. I don't know, but I think we seriously need to think about that.
Yeah, I am trying to be in the Ana Maria optimistic way about this issue too.
Yeah, it's both, right? It's both something to be worried about and something to be excited about, I think.
Another question. How does the use of AI-powered tools challenge traditional notions of academic integrity?
It's a great question. I think it challenges it because this idea of cognitive offloading. So we used to think using a spelling or grammar check was a violation of academic integrity because we used to teach and assess whether students could spell and write well. And now we don't, because we know machines are doing it. And so we don't think of using a spell or grammar check as cheating anymore, except maybe in a elementary school where they're still trying to teach that, right? And so it will change our definitions of what is cheating and what isn't. I don't think it changes our notions of academic integrity, which, according to Ikai, is the courage to be honest, responsible, respectful, fair, and trustworthy, even when it's difficult to do so, right? So that remains true, because even if students are using Gen AI, even if we decide it's okay to cognitively offload some things to Gen AI, we still want that transparency piece for the trustworthiness. And so I think it challenges traditional notions of cheating, but not of integrity, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Now, how are you approaching to this issue related to research work in San Diego?
Research by faculty and researchers?
Research, yes, researchers.
Well, I don't know how the university is approaching it, because that's outside of my area. But we already know that journals are getting articles submitted listing ChatGPT as a co-author, which they have said they're not. You can't be an author if you can't defend your ideas, if you can't actually think. So we know that others are submitting papers that was that one magazine, a science fiction magazine, had to stop submissions because they went from, I think, I'm making up numbers here, but something like 5 submissions a month to 50 or 500 because people were submitting artificially intelligent generated papers. And so I think that journal editors, granting agencies, anybody that uses research products is going to have the same problem that we're having as teachers. Is this original? Is this valid? Is this reliable research? So the questions have always stayed the same, but I think we're going to be flooded with a lot more garbage than we have in the past. So it's a big topic as well.
We don't have any more questions, I think. Okay, Tricia, thank you again for accepting our invitation and for sharing with us all your experience. And see you in another opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good luck, everybody. Don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.